Welcome to 52 Essential Conversations. I'm Jenny Wu, and I'm sitting next to Sade, and we are talking about asking for help.
Yes, we are.
Yes, and Sade Abraham is a founder and learning scientist of Kairos Learning, which is an ed tech startup using gaming to address the intangible barriers to mobility and low-income learners. She holds not one, but two master's degrees in education. One from the Harvard Graduate School of Education with a focus on developmental cognitive neuroscience. And the second one from Rutgers University in higher education. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, I must say, you're one of those people that I truly admire, and I'm really excited to have you here.
Yes, I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
So let's jump into it. Okay, so tell us, what is the significance behind asking for help?
Right. So I think I even got confused by this in my own time and in my own research as well. When people think about asking for help, it's like, I'm sitting here and I'm not going. Even when you think about students or learners, it's about, they're reluctant to go to tutoring, or they realize that they can't fix a problem, but they're not asking for the right resources. A lot of times that's not what we see. That is some of the hallmarks of folks that need to ask for help. However, sometimes folks are going to tutoring. Folks are seeking help in the traditional ways that we think of. Yep. But then things really hit the fan when we start grappling with their own internalized ideas of what they can do. So there may be some things that's like, I can ask for help with that, but there are some things that are off limits. And those are the things that we need to really start to unpack in learners, students, even myself. I had to learn that, where I can always say proudly that I was bad at math, and I needed to I had math anxiety. But there were some things that were untouchable for me. There were some things where I couldn't admit that I needed support, or I didn't think I needed support. And those were the untouchable areas where I would try to rough it out by myself instead of seeking support.
Yeah, so tell me more about the untouchables, right? Yeah. How do those look like out of the students you've worked with? And I love your personal stories as well.
Oh, yeah.
And how can we as parents sort of to open that up?
Yes. So I work with a lot of the bright minds at Harvard College, particularly some of them that are first generation or identify as low income. So they are incredible. They are sharp, and that goes without saying, these are Harvard students. However, I think that I made a mistake as a supervisor when I was working with them, that I think I was so, even though I go here too, I was so amazed by these Harvard undergrads. Like, wow, these are the most brilliant minds. And when they said they were fine, when they said they were okay, I wanted to be a supervisor that believed them. And I also didn't want to, I know I was also kind of like a control freak myself. So I was like, I want to listen to my students for the first time in my life. I'm going to not jump too hard, go too far in, and I'm going to listen to them. Unfortunately, I picked the wrong population of students to do that with, because in fact they actually needed help, and they would not tell me. So I did assessments. I did little piece of paper on the table before they left our meetings and said should I step in or step back a little bit more? And everyone said everything's fine. I asked them, do you need any support in any way? How can I support you? And even with the probing, they were not ready or comfortable to say, I'm a little overwhelmed. I think they had expectations of what they should be able to do, and even when someone was asking for help, they took that as kind of like when someone says, "How are you doing?" You have to say, "I'm fine." They took it as that, when what they really, really needed the support. And until things hit the fan, I was like, when were you all going to tell me this? And they didn't have an answer for it. They just felt like they could handle it by themselves.
Yeah. So tell me more about what do you think happened earlier, whether it's education or home environment, that really led them to sort of what I'm hearing is almost defining that asking for help is a sign of weakness.
Absolutely. That you hit the nail on the head there. And I think I would even start but it's so weird how these things surface in our adult lives, right? Or even as late adolescence. So when I even think back to my own experience, and my parents met immigrant parents who came to the U.S. I was also not even born in the U.S. And just striving to work really, really hard for their kids. And then so I even see with my little sister now. She got a 94 on a paper on a class assignment, and they're like, where are the other 6 points?
Oh,
You know, and I know so many parents that do that. You just want to push your child to succeed. But I would recommend maybe thinking about that in a different way and really reframing that, and maybe just celebrating the work that they've done and asking them, like, what are you proud of on this test? What are you really happy that you did? What was something that you weren't sure of, but you stuck with your gut and you pushed through?
Right.
What were your strategies for success, and what would you like to see happen again? Instead of fixating on those 6 points, why are we not celebrating the 94? So I think it starts with things like that, where we all mean well, and that's something I'm going to have to erase in my own parenting when I become a parent.
Yeah.
But really trying to reframe that unrelenting standards for things that you're doing well. Celebrate that. So I think that it begins with that, and then the students start thinking to themselves there's more I could have done. And you really start fixating on the things that you've missed instead of the things that you've done really well. And then when it comes to help, I think it shows up in different places, but I do think that there's an element of, I got this, and I should be able to have this without help. And sometimes and I think in this culture currently, and I'm a millennial, so I hate to say social media has a part in this, but there's a quote that says that you compare, people struggle with insecurities because you compare your behind the scenes to everyone's highlight reel. So
yes.
on Facebook or wherever, or these students are seeing, you see everyone's accomplishments, you're posting all the amazing things that are happening, and folks are not really hearing the behind the scenes or seeing the behind the scenes of what that looks like, and thinking that they too have to somehow get to that without what success looks like. Oftentimes is not strictly linear, and there are a lot of potholes in that process, but folks are not seeing that, and we're only seeing the highlight reel of everyone's lives. So I think that's something that happens. So parents, I think, definitely play a part in that, and also just being able to say, okay, I messed up, and okay, I'm not comfortable. And I think that starts early enough to maybe parents need to start modeling that actually, and saying, wow, I really messed that up. And I think hearing at the dinner table your parents say that, you may think it shows a sign of weakness, but I think it shows a sign of strength.
Yeah, that's so well said, and it's something that it's actually really easy to do, right?
Simple applications.
Tonight. And I can certainly draw a parallel just listening to you and this notion of motherhood. There's a lot of perfectionism behind that, of a certain persona you needed to carry as a mother, and you needed to do.
That's such a great point, honestly. And I've heard of that. I'm not a mother yet, but I've heard of that, and I think that as easy as it is for us to say to our children, like, oh, you just need to relax, and we need to think about that in our own parenting and our own models of behavior, and thinking, how hard is this for us to unlearn some of those things that we've been taught, and see that in how these students are and these learners are approaching their academics. That's the same way, like, it's hard to tell a parent to unlearn what perfectionism looks like as a mother. And you can do it, but it takes actionable steps every day, and for you to actively seek that out.
So let's talk more about the unlearning part, right? Because I'm ready to unlearn. I mean, personally, also as an immigrant and the Chinese population, a lot of, the battle hymn of Tiger Mom came out of that. And as a, which I would say recovering perfectionist.
Yes, I am on the road as well.
So, I'm curious as far as your thought about unlearning that. And in particular, I know you've done so much research. You've written this paper, Perfectionism and Maladaptive Practices, as well as your experience as a director over at Harvard College, working with students. What can we do to unlearn that?
Yes. That's a great question. I think I'll start with the things that have worked for me and that I'm trying to embed in my practices as a program director, and hopefully what I will do with my children. So starting with I think I had to learn, and this is an everyday process because I forget all the time, that you can't let perfect be the enemy of great. So I would always strive for the perfection, and instead of that, just being okay with I did my best in this, and sometimes that in that striving for perfection, it would mean to some folks, the thoughts that come into their head, it would be, I can do this by myself, or I'm okay, I can handle this, or why am I burdening someone else with something that I can do? And I think that's problematic because a lot of the students that I work with, they come in and they think, they've kind of been in survival mode their entire life. So that's like particularly for the low income first generation students who've gone through trauma and anxiety. It's kind of like you've been in a struggle. And a student told me something so prolific one day where it was kind of like, after living off of crumbs, I don't know how to handle a loaf of bread. And it's just not being able to, like, there are thousands of resources here at Harvard. And one of the things I speak to my students about all the time is that why did you wait to go to the tutoring center in November when you knew it was a resource in August? And they are stumped a lot of the time. So as I'm saying this and working through solutions, I'm hearing from the students themselves in terms of what can we do to create behaviors that will allow us to say, you know what, I'm going to do this earlier. One of the things we're working on right now is creating programs where you hear from other students, mentorship in terms of the way. So hearing the success stories and the stories of failure, not only for students, but we're actually working on something where we have professors and administrators come in and talk about this. It's something called the Success Failure Project, and sharing what that looks like as a professor. So we have a professor that we're hoping to bring in for the summer, for the pre-orientation program, where he failed his first 3 chemistry exams, and he's now like the head of the chemistry department. So sharing those different narratives of what success looks like, so that they don't have this one monolithic like idea of I need to do this to become successful. There's failure deeply embedded in success, and I think that in the helping and the asking for help, I think modeling that as a parent is important. I also think that having conversations and letting students assess what is their thinking behind why they won't ask for this help. So kind of like, if I don't meet this expectation, what does this mean? If I don't do this well, does this ruin my entire plan? So like really unpacking for students when they start having this all or nothing thinking. What is underneath that? So sometimes it's just a matter of asking really good questions to hear someone say like, you know what? You're right, it's really actually not that serious. Like, or it's serious, but maybe I'm overreacting a little bit. Maybe I'm making this one situation bigger than it needs to be.
Yeah.
Hope that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. And it reminds me of even at work. I mean, it's sort of like fighting fire. Everything, there's this incredible sense of urgency. There's prioritization. Everything is, high on the top. I needed something yesterday. And I can see parents taking that same mentality home.
Absolutely.
Demanding of the same thing of their children.
And I think that that's where that vulnerability comes in, where you have to be able, in all areas of your life, to be vulnerable and say something like, like I've messed up, or I don't know the answer. Like even with a parent, we get like, kids always ask 1,000 questions. I think it's refreshing sometimes to say, you know what, I don't know, and then take it a step further to like, let's go look that up together. Right. Or actually, this is really confusing for me too. Let's go find someone that can help us. In the grocery store, like, oh, let's go ask someone for help here. Like, little things like that will model the behavior that we're hoping to see in students. And we can build on that as they go on. And I do think it begins with you doing it yourself as a parent so that your children can see it being modeled.
Yeah, I can see that really shifting how you think and thinking that, I'm a lifelong learner. We are on this journey to growth. Exactly. We're on this journey together. Absolutely. And we're supposed to make mistakes. We're supposed to not know everything.
Absolutely. And actually, that's one thing that that really, I found this out this year, actually. And it changed my life. I took my first business class this year at the business school. And the idea of a minimum viable product, MVP. That's like, what on earth? Why did someone tell me about this earlier? And for those that are also just like, it's just about taking the minimum viable product, essentially. So what can you do to produce the task or the goal at a level that's not maybe 100%, but it gets the job done, but it's definitely not, all the bells and whistles are not on it, but you can see the vision, you can understand what you're doing, and you move on from there. You can build on it after, you can iterate, so there's a process of constantly changing. So kind of going back to solutions, one of the things that I implemented with my students, we have to launch a pre-orientation program, the first one's in 2001 at Harvard College. By August. So so it was a big deal, and I think all of us were like kind of like on the weight of that and the task that we were given. What are we going to do? So from January, I met them in January, and we had like all these months to get it together. And from day one, and it was kind of the idea of like, let's just put it on the board. Let's create it today. And they're like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, let's just do it. Let's just create the orientation right now. We have 3 days here. Let's start throwing in boxes of things that we want to happen. And they're like, we don't know anything. Like, what? We're supposed to be learning from you. And I'm like, no, let's see. And then we can. There's always an opportunity later on. We're going to continually and constantly change this, but let's see what we have to start with. And I think that that's super important. And we did that. And we've changed it probably 1,000 times since then. But it was a relief to just see, we have dates and times and locations and ideas. Instead of kind of working towards, the way I would have usually done it is spent 1,000 years doing research and picking the best practices and interviewing folks and finding everything, and then maybe sometime in June I would have started the idea of creating the content.
Yeah.
Whereas we just kind of flipped where the content's already made and we're just going to keep improving and iterating on it as we go.
Yeah. So for the parents who are familiar with also design thinking process,
Yes.
use that.
Yes, it's amazing, and it has really unlocked some things for me in terms of my own learning and just saying like what can I just get down right now, like basic, and then I can do all the extra stuff later on, because I was a learner and I still am in some ways the person that all of the structure and all of the aesthetics of something have to be perfect before I even write the content. So developing things like I was when I was a learner, when I was in school, if I didn't write my name right on the top of the page, I would have to throw out the paper. And that, I didn't know then, but like those are the hallmarks of perfectionism. And it has shown up in so many places where it's like you'll be fine. Like, why does that matter to you? And what are you thinking about the fact that like this is not perfect? And it's a handwriting, so it's to get to that point. So I think it shows up in really interesting ways, and I think we need to just actively name it and work to take this out of our everyday thinking.
Yeah. That is so well said, and it's incredibly liberating.
Yes. Oh, yes. Sometimes frustrating and then liberating.
That's right.
Yes,
and then you waver between the two.
Absolutely.
But
absolutely.
The bigger
overall,
arc is,
it pays off so much, because you end up in paralysis sometimes when you're not asking for help, and there's so many maladaptive behaviors that come from just sitting there in your own stuff. And that leads to you sometimes not even getting the job done at all. Yeah. And we can't have that. We don't want that for our students.
And, I hate to bring this up, right? But certainly it ties into stress management.
Yes.
And
yes.
when we witness suicide clusters,
yes.
right? Things like that from mental health perspective, I think asking for help is incredibly important.
When I worked with a lot of high achieving students, not only at Harvard but at several Ivy League institutions.
You were at NYU.
Yes, yes,
yes.
I was in Abu Dhabi, and one of the things that kind of scared me the most when I saw these students were they were so talented, working so hard, but then these behaviors showed up in places that no one even, well, I'm sure maybe scholars predicted, but at that time I could not believe where I would see these unrelenting standards. It would show up in fitness. So I had students that would work out 3 to 4 times a day, and we had to intervene.
Oh, wow.
Because these ideas of like what I need to do and how I need to perform, they don't just end in the classroom. And it's very dangerous in the classroom, but this is pervasive all throughout. And then there's also a relationship between perfectionism and eating disorders, because there's an element of control there. So long story short, it's something that we really don't want in others, because the problem is the narrative of perfectionism and those folks that are like, no, I can do this by myself, I don't need the help, is that, they're surviving and they're thriving because of the perfectionism, not in spite of it. And there's a lot of issues with this positive connotation about those folks that can do it all.
Yes.
And people think that it's kind of like a fashionable thing to say when a job interview, oh, there was a joke back in the day, always say that you're a perfectionist when they ask for your flaw. Because there's still some type of positive thing, you're a worker bee, but there are so many negative things and drawbacks to that. So yes, you can see sometimes you see the end product, but the journey that folks have to go through and the ways it shows up in everyday life sometimes outweigh, most of the time outweighs the benefits. So I don't think it's something that we want to instill in our students and our learners, because it shows up in ways that we cannot predict, and it's hard to unlearn if you're not paying attention to it.
Yeah, wow. It could not come timelier, given that this is the month of Mental Health Awareness Month. I think we need to really change the language, change the mindset of what perfectionist means.
Absolutely.
And really the fact that asking for help is the right thing to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So with that said, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. This was fantastic. I really enjoyed myself. Thank you.
Good. Great. And thank you so much for tuning in to 52 Essential Conversations.